3 years. That's how long the Alpha King stood over an empty grave, his soul torn by the scent of ash and blood. But tonight, in the suffocating dark of an underground auction, the impossible happens. A masked Omega steps onto the block carrying the exact scent of his dead mate. The winter wind howling through the parapets of Oakhaven Castle sounded too much like a dying wolf. King Valerian stood on the grand balcony, his massive hands gripping the freezing stone balustrade until the granite groaned under the pressure. Snowflakes caught in his dark, untamed hair and melted against the feverish heat of his skin. He did not feel the cold. For 3 years, a suffocating glacial numbness had settled inside his chest, taking residence precisely where his mate's soul had once intertwined with his own. Her name was Isolde. 3 years ago, on the treacherous roads of the Iron Bridge Gorge, her royal carriage had been ambushed. Valerian had been fighting a border skirmish leagues away. By the time his royal guard reached the gorge, there was nothing left but splintered wood, slaughtered guards, and a devastating pool of blood soaked into the earth. The air had been thick with the cloying stench of wolfsbane and charred flesh. They never found her body, but the sheer volume of blood, mixed with the undisputed scent of her distress, had led the kingdom's top healers to declare her dead. An Omega couldn't survive such trauma. Since that day, the Alpha King of the Western Reaches had become a ghost in his own court. The kingdom whispered about the feral drift, the slow, creeping madness that claims an alpha when the mate bond is violently severed. Valerian was ruthless cold and possessed a hair-trigger temper that kept his court in a constant state of terror. My king, the heavy oak doors of the chamber opened, and Bastian, the king's beta and most trusted general, stepped onto the balcony. Bastian was a scarred, pragmatic warrior who had bled beside Valerian in a dozen wars. He was also the only man brave enough to approach the Alpha when the grief was heavy in the air. "Speak," Valerian rumbled his voice, a low, gravelly vibration that rattled the glass in the window panes. He did not turn around. "Our spies in the lowlands have returned," Bastian said, stepping closer, though he wisely kept his neck bowed in submission to Valerian's volatile aura. The rumors were true. The Obsidian Lodge is hosting another gathering tonight. It's an exclusive high society auction. The guest list is heavily guarded, but we intercepted a ledger. They are selling supernatural contraband, relics, stolen weaponry, and trafficked wolves. Valerian finally turned, his golden eyes flashing in the gloom of the winter night. The underground slave trade was a blight he had spent his reign trying to eradicate. It was run by a syndicate of rogue alphas and corrupt human aristocrats who viewed Omegas with rare bloodlines as mere collector's items. "Where is it?" Valerian's voice was terrifyingly calm. "The old Lancaster estate, deep in the neutral zone of the Whispering Woods," Bastian replied. "Lord Corvus is rumored to be the auctioneer. The lords and ladies attending will be masked, highborn scum looking for exotic pets. We have a strike team ready to burn the place to the ground on your order." "No," Valerian said, his claws extending, slightly scratching against the stone. "If we march a battalion into the neutral zone, Corvus will scatter his merchandise to the wind before we breach the gates. I want the syndicate's head. We go in quietly, masked, as buyers." Bastian's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. "I will prepare the cloaks and the gold, sire." 3 hours later, the king and his beta were riding through the dense, fog-choked pines of the neutral zone. They wore the opulent, velvet-lined cloaks of traveling merchants, their faces obscured by polished silver masks, the mandatory attire for the lodge. Valerian's blood boiled beneath his skin. The closer they got to the Lancaster estate, the heavier the scent of fear became. It was a sour, metallic tang in the air that made the alpha in him want to shift into his massive midnight black wolf form and tear throats out. The Lancaster estate was a sprawling Gothic monstrosity of black stone and iron gates, hidden from the world by ancient magic and deep corruption. Carriages bearing the crests of disgraced noble houses, and some who were supposedly loyal to Valerian's crown, were lined up in the courtyard. Valerian and Bastian presented their forged invitations to the heavily armed mercenaries at the iron-wrought doors. The guards, reeking of cheap ale and rogue wolf musk, inspected the wax seals before stepping aside. The moment Valerian stepped inside the grand ballroom, his senses were violently assaulted. The room was a dizzying display of grotesque wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, deceptive glow over lords and ladies who sipped blood-red wine and laughed behind intricate masquerade masks. But beneath the perfume, the roasted meats and the expensive cigars, the underlying scent was undeniable misery. "Keep your head down," Bastian murmured through the mind link, a telepathic channel reserved for pack members. Corvus is on the stage. At the far end of the ballroom, a raised mahogany platform served as the auction block. Standing at the podium was Lord Corvus, a thin, venomous man with a tailored silk suit and a half-mask that covered a scarred visage. He tapped a golden gavel against the podium, bringing the wretched room to a hushed, anticipatory silence. "Welcome, esteemed guests." Corvus's voice slithered through the room, amplified by acoustics. "Tonight, the Obsidian Lodge offers you treasures beyond your wildest depravities. We have rare bloodlines. We have the unbroken. We have the exquisite." Valerian crossed his arms, leaning against a marble pillar near the back of the room. His golden eyes locked onto Corvus, mentally calculating exactly how many seconds it would take to cross the room and rip the auctioneer's spine through his chest. Soon, Valerian told his wolf. Soon we slaughter them all. The auction began with sickening efficiency. Lot after lot was dragged onto the stage. A pair of twin betas from the northern tundras, a human seer with blind, milky eyes, an injured rogue alpha who was sold to a fighting pit proprietor for a staggering sum of gold. With every bang of Corvus's golden gavel, Valerian's rage tightened like a coiled spring. He signaled Bastian with a slight movement of his fingers, instructing his general to memorize the sense of every buyer in the room. When the night was over, none of them would see the sunrise. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," Corvus announced, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial theatrical whisper, "we arrive at the crown jewel of the evening. Lot 77. The heavy velvet curtains behind the podium shuddered. This particular item was acquired under complicated circumstances." Corvus continued pacing the stage. "An omega, but not just any omega, a pure blood. The resilience of this creature is fascinating. We purchased her from a band of human scavengers deep in the Ironbridge Gorge 3 years ago. She was half dead, shattered, her mind wiped clean by trauma. It took us years to nurse her back to a sellable state. She is mute. She is docile, and her scent, well, you will see for yourselves." At the mention of the Ironbridge Gorge, the world seemed to stop spinning. Valerian's heart missed a beat. Ironbridge, the exact location where Isolde's carriage had been attacked. A cold sweat broke out over the back of his neck. No, it's a coincidence. A cruel, sick trick of the fates. 2 hulking guards stepped through the curtains, dragging a slender figure between them. She was draped in a sheer white silk gown that offered no warmth and little modesty. Heavy iron chains bound her delicate wrists, the metal biting into her pale skin. A stark, featureless porcelain mask covered the upper half of her face, leaving only her trembling lips and jaw exposed. She stumbled as they forced her to the center of the block. Then the ventilation fans above the stage shifted, blowing the air from the podium directly into the crowd. Valerian inhaled. Time shattered. The grand ballroom, the murmuring crowd, the crystal chandeliers, everything dissolved into a blinding white roar of static. Jasmine and petrichor. It was the scent of night-blooming jasmine after a heavy summer rain. It was a scent that had been burned into Valerian's soul, a scent he had spent the last 3 years desperately trying to find in the empty, cold sheets of his massive bed. It was the scent of his heart, the scent of his mate, Isolde. His wolf clawed violently at the surface of his mind, howling a sound of such profound agony and feral joy that Valerian physically staggered forward, his shoulder slamming into the marble pillar. Alpha Bastion asked through the mind link, a spike of genuine alarm in his tone. "Sire your aura, rein it in. They will notice." Valerian couldn't hear him. His eyes now burning, a blinding, unnatural gold, were locked onto the fragile woman on the stage. Even behind the mask, he recognized the curve of her jaw, the way her shoulders hitched when she was terrified, the exact shade of her raven hair tumbling down her back. But there were horrific differences. Faint, jagged scars peeked out from beneath the silk of her collarbone. She was dangerously thin, and her posture, Isolde had been a fierce, laughing Omega, who stood tall. This woman was completely broken, staring blankly at the floor as if her mind had fled her body. "We start the bidding at 50,000 gold pieces," Corvus shouted. 50,000, a masked lord in the front row immediately yelled. Valerian recognized his voice, the exiled Duke of Harrington, a man known for his sadistic treatment of his servants. 60, a woman shrieked from the balcony. 70. Harrington countered, stepping closer to the stage, his eyes hungry. "Look at the skin on her. I'll break her the rest of the way." A low, guttural growl began to vibrate in Valerian's chest. It wasn't a human sound. It was the primordial, earth-shaking rumble of an apex predator whose territory had been breached. The ambient temperature in the ballroom plummeted. Frost began to spiderweb across the crystal glasses on the tables. Several patrons shivered, looking around in confusion, as a suffocating heavy pressure suddenly descended upon the room. The oppressive weight of a furious Alpha King's aura. 80,000 someone else yelled, oblivious to the impending doom. Valerian took a step forward. His silver merchant's mask cracked down the center from the sheer force of his transforming facial bones. He forced the shift back, maintaining his human form, but his control was completely gone. 100,000! Harrington bellowed triumphantly. Going once, Valerian moved. He didn't walk. He stalked through the crowd, shoving a wealthy baron so hard, the man flew backward and crashed through a table of champagne. Gasps and shouts of indignation erupted, but they died instantly as Valerian reached the center aisle. 500,000! Valerian's voice echoed through the cavernous hall. It wasn't a bid, it was an executioner's bell. The sheer volume and absolute authority in his tone silenced the room entirely. Corvus swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the towering man in the cracked silver mask. "For 500,000 to the gentleman in the back. Do I hear no?" Valerian said, his voice dropping to a demonic register. He reached up and ripped the silver mask from his face, tossing it to the floor where it clattered loudly in the dead silence. Gasps of absolute horror rippled through the aristocracy. Masks slipped. Wine glasses shattered on the floor. "The king," someone whimpered. "It's the Alpha King." Valerian didn't look at them. He kept his glowing golden eyes locked on the stage. He vaulted onto the platform in a blur of terrifying speed. The 2 guards stationed beside Isolde raised their weapons, but Valerian didn't even break stride. He backhanded the first guard with enough force to snap his neck instantly. He grabbed the second by the throat and hurled him off the stage, sending him crashing into the front row of seats. Corvus scrambled backward, dropping his gavel. "Your Majesty, we didn't know the syndicate." "Run!" Valerian snarled, not looking at him. Run, Corvus, and I might give you a 5-second head start before I tear you to pieces." Corvus didn't need to be told twice. He fled into the wings. The ballroom erupted into sheer panic as Bastion and the hidden royal guards threw off their cloaks, blocking the exits and drawing their broadswords. But Valerian was entirely focused on the trembling figure cowering on the wooden floorboards. Isolde had dropped to her knees, curling into a tight ball, her hands covering her head in a desperate defensive posture. She was shaking violently, letting out tiny broken whimpers. Isolde Valerian breathed the anger instantly evaporating, replaced by a devastating, crushing wave of sorrow. He dropped to his knees in front of her. Slowly, as if trying not to startle a wounded bird, he reached out and gently took hold of the porcelain mask. He unclasped the leather strap at the back of her head and pulled it away. Her face was exactly as he remembered it. Heartbreakingly beautiful with high cheekbones and soft, full lips. But as she finally looked up at him, Valerian felt his heart stop completely. Her eyes, once a vibrant, sparkling emerald green that looked at him with profound love, were wide vacant and filled with absolute, paralyzing terror. She pressed herself backward, scrambling away from him until her back hit the podium. "Please," she stammered, her voice raspy from years of disuse, her hands raised to shield her face. "Please, Alpha. I'll be good. I'll obey. Don't hurt me." She didn't know him. The mate bond in her eyes was dead buried beneath 3 years of unspeakable torture and memory-wiping drugs. The Alpha King had finally found his lost queen, only to realize that the woman who held his soul had been completely erased. "Please," Isolde begged, her frail body shrinking against the auction block. "Don't hurt me." The words struck Valerian with the force of a physical blow, shattering what was left of his hardened heart. The Alpha King, a man who had slaughtered entire armies without shedding a single tear, felt a hot, burning wetness spill over his eyelashes. He did not care that his elite guards were watching. He did not care that the captured nobles were witnessing the total vulnerability of their ruthless monarch. All that mattered was the broken woman cowering before him. Valerian took a slow, deep breath, forcing the violent, possessive instincts of his inner wolf to heal. If his alpha aura frightened her, he would crush it down until he was nothing more than a shadow. He shrugged off his heavy velvet merchant's cloak. Moving with agonizing slowness to ensure she could see his hands at all times, he draped the warm, fur-lined fabric over her shivering shoulders. Isolde flinched violently at the contact, squeezing her eyes shut, expecting a strike. When none came, she tentatively opened one eye, staring at the rich fabric pooling around her chained wrists. "I am not going to hurt you," Valerian whispered, his voice cracking. He kept his head bowed, baring his neck in an extreme display of submission, a gesture unheard of for an Alpha King. "You are safe now. No one will ever touch you again." Bastion approached quietly from behind, handing Valerian a set of heavy iron keys retrieved from a dead guard. With trembling fingers, Valerian unlocked the crude shackles binding her wrists. As the heavy metal clattered to the floor, Isolde rubbed her bruised skin, looking at Valerian with a mixture of profound confusion and lingering terror. Bastion Valerian commanded softly, never taking his eyes off his mate. "Burn this estate to the bedrock. Execute every buyer. But first prepare the carriage. We are going home." The journey back to Oakhaven Castle was agonizing. Isolde huddled in the furthest corner of the opulent carriage, wrapped tightly in Valerian's cloak, staring blankly out the frost-covered window. She did not speak. She did not react to his scent. When they arrived at the royal stronghold, Valerian bypassed the grand halls and carried her directly to his private chambers. He laid her gently on the massive 4-poster bed, stepping back immediately so she wouldn't feel trapped. Within the hour, the kingdom's most esteemed royal physician, Victor Alden, arrived. Dr. Alden was a brilliant beta, with decades of experience treating severe supernatural traumas. He spent an hour examining Isolde, while Valerian paced the corridor outside like a caged beast, his claws gouging deep trenches into the stone walls. Finally, the heavy oak door creaked open. Dr. Alden stepped out, his expression grim, his hand stained with the faint residue of healing salves. "Speak, Victor," Valerian demanded, gripping the physician's shoulder tight enough to bruise. "Can her memories be restored? Why does she look at me as if I am a monster?" Dr. Alden sighed heavily, adjusting his spectacles. "My king, the physical malnutrition and the scars, those I can heal. But her mind is a different battlefield entirely. Her memory loss is not merely the result of trauma from the carriage ambush." Valerian froze. "Explain." "I found traces of a dark alchemical substance in her bloodstream. Letha's venom," Dr. Alden said, keeping his voice to a whisper. "It is an illegal, highly toxic serum used to sever a wolf from their inner beast and wipe their memory. It requires constant monthly doses to maintain the amnesia. The human scavengers who sold her did not have the means to acquire such a rare poison." The air in the corridor grew dangerously cold. Valerian's eyes flared a blinding gold. "Are you telling me," Valerian snarled, every syllable dripping with lethal intent, "that the ambush in the Iron Bridge Gorge was a deliberate assassination attempt, and when they failed to kill her, they sold her into slavery and funded her continuous memory wiping?" "Yes, sire," Dr. Alden nodded solemnly. "Whoever orchestrated this needed her gone, but perhaps lacked the stomach to finish the kill themselves. This poison is exorbitantly expensive. The traitor who funded this, they are wealthy, and they are likely someone inside your own court." A terrifying, chilling realization washed over the king. For 3 years, he had been breaking bread with his mate's would-be murderer. The rogue alphas and human scavengers were just pawns. The true orchestrator of his agony was walking the halls of Oakhaven Castle. Over the next month, Valerian transformed his entire existence. He locked down the castle, claiming the sickness of a mysterious rescued Omega to keep the court at bay. He slept on the cold stone floor beside the fireplace, refusing to share the bed to give Isolde the space she desperately needed. He personally brought her meals, sliding the trays across the table and retreating, speaking to her in soft, gentle tones. Slowly, painfully, the ice began to thaw. Isolde stopped flinching when he entered the room. She began to eat. She started to watch him with a curious, analytical gaze, though her voice remained locked away. The mate bond was still dormant, suppressed by the lingering poison in her veins. But Valerian was endlessly patient. He would wait a lifetime if it meant seeing her smile again. But a storm was brewing in the shadows of the court. The traitor had noticed the king's sudden reclusion, and they knew exactly who the mysterious Omega was. The winter solstice brought a biting frost to the kingdom, and with it the annual masquerade ball, a tradition Valerian could not cancel without raising severe suspicions among his restless council. He instructed Bastian to double the royal guard and confine Isolde to the highest tower, protected by wards and elite sentinels. "Do not let anyone enter her chambers," Valerian ordered his beta as he adjusted his formal military regalia. "If a single soul breaches that door, I will have your head." "She is safe with me, Alpha," Bastian vowed. Down in the grand hall, the masquerade was a glittering sea of deceit. Valerian moved through the crowd of aristocrats, his senses hyper-alert, analyzing every scent, every whisper. He was hunting for the scent of Letha's venom. Dr. Alden had warned him that whoever handled the poison would carry a faint, bitter undertone of crushed oleander on their skin. Meanwhile, high in the locked tower, Isolde sat by the fireplace, brushing her raven hair. The lavish warmth of the castle had begun to bring the color back to her cheeks. She still couldn't remember her past, but a strange, protective warmth bloomed in her chest whenever she thought of the terrifying king who slept on the floor just to make her feel safe. Suddenly, the heavy iron locks on her chamber door clicked open. Isolde turned, her breath catching in her throat. The guards outside were silent. In the doorway stood a woman in an elegant emerald green ball gown. It was Lady Evelyn Cross, the daughter of the kingdom's highest-ranking minister. Evelyn had always coveted the throne, positioning herself as the king's primary suitor. After Isolde's death, Evelyn closed the door behind her, locking it from the inside. A sickeningly sweet perfume wafted from her skin, but beneath the heavy jasmine scent was a sharp, bitter edge of crushed oleander. "Well, well," Evelyn sneered, pulling off her masquerade mask to reveal a face twisted with cruel jealousy. "I paid a fortune to ensure you rotted in that underground fighting pit, yet here you are. The indestructible Luna." Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. She backed away, hitting the edge of the vanity table. The scent of the woman's perfume. It triggered something deep within the darkest recesses of her suppressed mind. A flash of splintered wood, the metallic tang of blood in the gorge. A woman standing over her broken body, pouring a burning liquid down her throat. "You," Isolde gasped the first word she had spoken in 3 years. Her voice was raw, trembling. "Yes, me," Evelyn laughed sharply, drawing a slim silver dagger from the folds of her gown. "The guards outside are currently choking on a paralytic gas, courtesy of Tobias Feldor. We couldn't let Valerian find out, could we? The king has been distracted, but tonight I finish the job the scavengers failed to do." Evelyn lunged forward, the silver dagger gleaming in the firelight. But as the blade descended, something snapped inside Isolde. The profound primal terror of facing her murderer again didn't break her. It shattered the alchemical chains binding her wolf. The Lethi's venom burned out of her system in a sudden violent surge of pure adrenaline. Her emerald eyes, previously dull and vacant, ignited with an explosive radiant silver light. The dormant mate bond, dormant for 3 long years, reconnected with the force of a lightning strike. Down in the ballroom, Valerian stopped dead in his tracks. A massive, concussive wave of power rolled through the castle architecture, rattling the crystal chandeliers and making the lords and ladies gasp in shock. It was the overwhelming, unmistakable aura of a Luna claiming her territory. Isolde Valerian's wolf roared in his mind. Before Evelyn's dagger could even graze Isolde's skin, Isolde moved with supernatural speed. She caught Evelyn's wrist, her grip like a vice of solid iron. Evelyn gasped, her eyes widening in horror, as the fragile, broken Omega suddenly radiated the terrifying, dominant power of a fully awakened royal wolf. "You took 3 years of my life," Isolde snarled, her voice layered with the deep, resonant growl of her inner beast. With a brutal twist, she snapped Evelyn's wrist. The dagger clattered to the stone floor. Evelyn screamed, falling to her knees. The heavy oak doors to the chamber exploded inward, blasted off their iron hinges. Valerian stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his claws fully extended, radiating a murderous fury that turned the air to ice. Bastian and a squad of heavily armed guards swarmed into the room right behind him. Valerian's glowing golden eyes darted from the paralyzed guards in the hall to the weeping, broken Evelyn on the floor, and finally to his mate. Isolde stood tall, her chest rising and falling, the silver light slowly fading from her emerald eyes. She looked at Valerian, truly looked at him. The veil of amnesia was entirely gone, replaced by the profound, soul-deep recognition of her alpha. "Valerian," she whispered, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. Valerian crossed the room in a single bound, pulling her into a desperate, crushing embrace. He buried his face in her raven hair, inhaling the intoxicating scent of jasmine and petrichor shaking as he held her. She wrapped her arms fiercely around his neck, burying her face in his chest, anchoring him to the earth. "I have you," Valerian murmured fiercely against her skin. "I have you. You're safe." He turned his head slightly, his eyes locking onto the trembling, whimpering form of Evelyn Cross. Bastion. Valerian's voice was devoid of any mercy. "Arrest Lady Evelyn and Tobias Faldor. Throw them in the darkest pits of the dungeon. Tomorrow we hold a public execution for high treason." The traitors were dragged away, screaming, their cries echoing down the stone corridors, but Valerian and Isolde paid them no mind. The Alpha King scooped his Luna into his arms, carrying her toward the roaring fireplace. The nightmare was finally over. The king had been an empty ghost, ruling a frozen kingdom, but as his mate rested her head over his beating heart, the eternal winter of Oakhaven finally broke. The true queen had returned, and she would never be silenced again. Wow, what a thrilling journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimate revenge. If Valerian and Isolde's epic reunion had your heart racing, make sure to smash that like button. Let us know in the comments what you think Evelyn's punishment should be. Don't forget to share this story with your fellow werewolf romance fans, and subscribe to the channel for more intense, dramatic fantasy tales every week. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a chapter.